So in this video, I'm going to talk about RBAC. So for Kubernetes, RBAC in general is basically role-based access control, right? So we create a role and we assign users to the roles, and it's pretty much the same. The basic concept is that only the users can get access to the features based on their role. So a role can be a user, can like other role can be a tester or an admin or a developer, and then it can be integrated with the federated system. So, for example, the Kubernetes cluster, the RBAC can be integrated with the LDAP or AD groups in your environment. And when a user logs in, he's assigned the authentication is controlled by the active group, and the authorization is where the RBAC will come into picture, where then a role is assigned to a user, and then he can only do stuff based on that role. So in Kubernetes, the main object is it's called role, and another one is called the cluster role. Role is the only difference is that role is applicable within a namespace, and cluster role is a cluster wide. So I'm going to create a simple role. So if you see right now my cluster, right, there are some basic roles that are already there that are part of the kube public and kube system, and that were created as I created the cluster, and then as I added some other features. But most of them are basic. They are the as part of the kube ADM, they must have already been a part of the setting up of the cluster. So what I'm going to do is I will just grab a basic role. It's in my GitHub. And what this does is it creates a role, and I will create a namespace test because my namespace doesn't exist. And then I will just create an admin role. So what this role is doing is it is giving access for pods for the admin user. Whoever has that role can create pods, can get the list of the pods, they can watch it, and they can list. So if you want a particular role, like a team, to just be able to read the pods and like do a listing on the pods, then you can remove the create one, and then it can be get, watch, list. Just three verbs, like the three uh, of these will give access to just read only access. But as an admin, I want to create a role that can also create, right? So what I'm going to do is I'll create this role and the YAML. And I'm going to first create my namespace. So it got created, and I'll just do an apply. So if I do again my command, I will see my role is there. The last one is test admin. So what now I'm going to do is now this is the first piece of role. The next piece is role binding. So what role binding does it, if I create a user, it will attach my user to this role, and that's the piece called role binding object. So now I'm going to create a role binding. So in this is the YAML for role binding, and it's what it does. You have to give the namespace because it will create the role binding in the same namespace, and the important piece is the name, right? So here this is the username. So I've just given it nan, but in my example I'll give it as eks-admin because or I can give admin. Actually, this is not a EKS cluster, so I'll give it as admin user or something like that, and then I will create it. So then the user will have access to be able to create and list and do everything related to pods. So I will just grab this and I will do so let me change as this user. So now if I do You should be able to see mine one, the last one, pod admin, because that was the name of the binding, and it is, this binding is allowing a user whose ID is admin dash user to be able to access into the pods. But in my cluster, I don't have a user with that name. So what I'm going to do is I will create a user, or I admin dash user, and then I am going to see if that, when I get, so that user should be able to access the cluster through the kube config, and then they should be able to do a listing, and they should also be do any admin activity like creating of the pods or anything like that. And in the case of a cluster which is like, let's say EKS, which is on the cloud, the users are created in within the IAM, and they can be integrated with your it can be a federated user. So that user will have, that's how the user from the users created through IAM over in EKS, they can get access by adding roles and role bindings.